Hi, this is a workshop on how to use Google Earth in the classroom. If you're just starting out using Google Earth and you've never used it before, hopefully this will give you some ideas about how you might use it in the classroom, especially with natural disasters, things like that, which I'm going to sort of put on there as an example. So the first step you'll need is Google Earth, obviously. So easiest way to find out where that is just to click on your little um, search up here and then type in Google Earth and it should be the top one there. Just double click on that. It'll take a little while to load up. And I'll just play some weird thinking music while this is going. No, I'm not going to do that. So once it loads up, forget about all this. It seems very cluttered and things like that. This is the main area you'll find your things coming up. Um, what you'd like to do probably first, maybe with the kids, is to get them to research case studies around the world, potentially of natural disasters that you've been looking at in class, or potentially you've been looking at some and you want them to find their own natural disaster areas around the world, whatever it is. Let's say that you were looking at something in class on Cuba, for example, that went through some natural disasters. So in here, I just type in Cuba, hit search by hitting enter, and Google Earth will find Cuba for me. It's also a good way of showing kids where things are in the world if they don't know. So there's Cuba. Um, and you can zoom in and out by just using the trackpad up and down with two fingers, or you can use this scrolling thing here. Once you've got your place and you go, oh, I want the students to actually put something on there, they've got a few options. Up the top here you've got place marks. You've also got polygons, which are shapes instead of just a point of time. You've got paths that you might want them to show, paths of travel away from natural disasters, immigration out from afterwards might be something that you're after, and so you can show that with a path. Today I'll show you a few of them, so I'm just going to add a place mark in for Cuba, and I'll just spit it out. Now if I want to move it somewhere I can just drag it around. I just click and drag it around. It's a little bit more clunky with this than it is with Google My Maps, but it still works the same. So there's that, but I don't like my yellow pin. I think that looks ugly on my map. So I'm simply going to click on the yellow pin up here, and wackadoo, I can change that to anything I want. Let's say for natural disasters and things like that, let's say it was a flood. I might choose the flood symbol. Or a bushfire, I might choose a fire symbol. A drought, I could choose the sun, whatever you want. If you were trying to show multiple things on one particular continent or country, you might choose numbers. For this one, I'm just going to choose, I'll choose number 1, that's easiest. So I've put my number 1 in there and I'm happy with that. Click OK. Takes me back to this screen here. This gives us the latitude and longitude if that's something you're after. If not, forget about it. It's just something that locates it for you. You can then add in a description here. So you might do millions of people displaced, shelters being organised slowly, many still homeless, etc., etc. You might put some other stats and things in there. If you wanted to add an image, you just simply click on image here and find the URL of the image, I suppose. So it's more making you go into Google, finding a URL of an image first and pasting it in there, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way this one works. Click OK, that's fine. You can change the style and the color and things like that to pretty it up. the altitude, whether it's clamped to the ground or whether it's relative to seafloor. It doesn't really matter for this. And the only other option here is to give it a title. So you might say natural disaster 1, for example. You don't have to have a title. If you don't want the title in there and you want it to be free of titles and just have a pin, just get rid of it and the title's gone. Click OK, wackadoo, there's your little pin first. You'll notice over here, it comes over here. Here is your no name thing. It's got your little caption there, and when you click on it, it'll come up with your little note that you've put on there. You can also get directions to and from there from different locations using Google Earth, which is really handy. So one of the things you might also do is say, well, there was a large area that was affected by, let's say, a flood. And let's say it was the Bahamas at a massive sort of sea level rise, let's say. And you wanted to show, the students wanted to show using an area how big that disaster area was. So then they just click around making as many points of data as they want and get the shape that they want, and that's fine. Then they can also change the style color. I might change the area to a yellow to stand out nice and bright. Okay. I could also change the line around it, maybe make it black so it stands out a bit. I can change the width of that border to make it nice and thick and chunky and stand out if I wanted it to. Or I could just make it back to 1. The opacity, I can change how much this will be see-through or not see-through. So you will watch as I lower the opacity, it'll make it fade, and so I can still see the terrain behind it if you wanted to. Alright, so there's a polygon of the area that was affected potentially. And the last one I was going to show you is a line. So you might want to add a path. So let's say from this disaster in the Bahamas, you might ask them, well, where would be the best place to escape to if there was a flood in the Bahamas? Where would people go? And how would they get there and all those sorts of things? So you might want to add some paths in. So you might click on the Bahamas here. I think they'd go to Florida because it's the closest one. And then you might unpack this relationship here from the Bahamas to Cuba. Would they go to Cuba or would they not? Would they go to the Dominican Republic or not? So that's something else that you can do. So you can create some paths around the world. One of the things you might want to talk about if it's a place like Cuba is if they have a disaster, are people likely in this day and age to be able to transfer from say Cuba to the USA? Now in the past they might not have been able to because of political sort of tensions and things like that. It wasn't so easy. So now that those things have changed a lot over the years, is that now a funnel for aid and foreign help when Cuba finds itself in crisis? Whereas years ago that might not have been. So it allows you to show some immigration paths, some connections between countries and things like that. You can also add descriptions for those. So let's say it was immigration path from disaster. Click OK. Okay. And so when I click on that, bang, immigration path from disaster. I'll give that a title probably. Okay, so there's some kind of quicker, simplistic things that you can do with Google Earth to show relative disasters around the world. And when we zoom in, you can find them fairly easily. One of the disadvantages of this, overusing something like Google My Maps, I think kids get a lot into Google Earth, and there's lots you can do with Google Earth. However, when you zoom out, it's not as clear about your points as sometimes it can be. So, you click on this and it will zoom into your point, but when you've zoomed out, it doesn't show it as well. However, with Google Earth, you can find data sets on the internet for lots of things. So, for example, a natural disasters data set can be found on the internet. All you need to do is search for KMZ files. So if I go into here and I go volcanoes world and locations, and I'll just do .kmz. KMZ files are the things that Google Earth uses, and theoretically you might see KML, they're fine too. You will find some data sets on this, active volcanoes. Let's have a look at this one. When you click on it, it'll download to there. You can click on that and it will, once it loads, and I actually make it happen, bam. So here's all the active volcanoes around the world now that are highlighted for us. And if I turn this off, theoretically they should disappear or actually activate once in a while. And so the other problem with these, I suppose, is what we're finding now when I look at this, is there are lots of different people that can make KMZ files. Pretty much anyone can. And so how much of that data is real, how much of it is just someone's interpretation, is another matter altogether. So you can see here that my active volcanoes are not really showing up that well. So that might take a bit of playing around with. You might like to do that before the lesson if you're going to use that as a function. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Long-winded, but helpful. If you've got any queries or questions, you can either Google search and YouTube, or you can email me and I'll try and get back to you with an answer. Thanks.